In today's video, we are going to discuss why Enzo Maresca made a change from how his team beat Brentford's low block in his last game, his attempted tweak in the second half against Everton, and how Felix could have affected the game for Chelsea from the bench. So here we have how Chelsea set up on the ball. We've got Caicedo and Enzo in that double pivot. We've got Colwill and Disasi as those wide centre-backs. And we've actually had Gusto inverting in to this left pocket from that left-back. And we're going to speak about why Enzo Maresca chose to do that, and also how he was trying to sort of manipulate this Everton almost 5 block in the middle of the pitch. We're going to speak about why Maresca wanted to manipulate it a certain way, because I think the main differences from this game and against Brentford, both facing 2 low blocks, and in my preview for the Everton game, I expected a little bit more similarity in terms of the approach to aiming to break down this Everton low block. And I think the main figures that you can sort of point to is Maresca clearly thought against Brentford they were easier to pin in terms of they had a back 5. They had less of an outlet threat in terms of they did have Vissa and Mbermo, but with the likes of someone like Cucurella, who wasn't available for this game, who I think could have actually made this game largely different, which is crazy to consider when you're trying to think of how would you break down a low block, and to think Cucurella could have actually been an important sort of piece in this game. I think a lot of it comes down to Maresca didn't think he could sustain as much pressure with the current personnel on the pitch, mainly with the likes of, if we circle them here, Disasi having to play as almost that right centre-back, basically started at right back and having to play as that right centre-back and apply pressure on this winger here and match them run for run. So if he pushed up into this area here to sustain pressure and then the ball broke, especially because this was NDI, who is probably Everton's biggest threat on the counter-attack, if he gets away, then they've got so much space to attack. So I think in that sense, the idea was for Disasi to stay a bit deeper and not allow Everton that threat, especially if they linked it to someone like Calvert-Lewin. Disasi goes in and Di gets on the flick and he's away. So those sort of things to almost be a little bit more risk averse. And the same goes for Gusto on the left, right? I mean, again, I think he's a good counter presser in these sort of zones, but I think someone like Cucurella, if he was in this area, he sustains pressure slightly better. I still think it's a strength of Gusto's to win sort of these duels in the middle of the pitch, but I think Cucurella does it in a different way, especially in terms of hoovering up balls that are about to break into these wingers and sort of recovery runs in that sense to sustain pressure. So I think the loss of Cucurella and the fact that we had to play Disasi in this position really did sort of alter the game plan, in which case it almost to me became more of a Maresca wants to manipulate this line of 5. He wants to keep the ball in deeper areas around here and look to actually win this game by waiting till the right moment, waiting to manipulate the press, find a spare man, and then attack the back 4. And again, against Everton, that was going to come at a lesser rate, if you want to put it like that, not as often, because they are so sort of compact and good defensively. But I think Maresca sort of weighed up the options, and it feels like he took the approach of we've got more chance of attacking this Everton side in this way than we do with sustaining pressure with the players that we're going to put on the pitch. So I think that's why he went for this tactical sort of adjustment and decision of almost to put Enzo a bit deeper. And we'll speak about that first sort of tactical not tweak, but the idea behind this game. I think what Maresca had in mind was these 2 players are going to push up, and so this was Decore playing a little bit more as like sometimes as the you could call that a 4-4-2. Sometimes you could call it almost a drawing lines by accident. Almost you could call it like a 4-5-1, right, or the 4-1-4-1. The one that it's quite a common thing we see at the minute. Let me just change this to this. So what I think we was like sort of seeing is Doucouré almost dropping off to cover with Caicedo here. You'd have Calvert-Lewin to block one lane or the other. Let's just put him here for now. Again, Mangala would jump out of here to put pressure on Enzo. So this left Gana Gueye in this position here. Now it felt like Ndiaye was almost the one who was given a little bit more freedom. He did have to get back and double up on Neto on occasion, and he was looking to block that pass into Neto. But he wouldn't go as deep as, say, a Harrison, who we'll speak about in a minute, because I think he was, like I said, the outlet threat. I think the idea of keeping him a little bit higher was that Disasi didn't then push into this channel and one, support Neto, like offer him a little bit more support with underlaps and overlaps, but two, also allow Chelsea to sustain pressure in one half of the pitch, something they didn't do as much as they did against Brentford. So I think that was sort of the idea of Ndiaye for Everton and Sean Dyche. But then what you do have is, because of this, and because the primary role of this player here is to almost dual coverage between those two players, that then means that if Doucouré does go to apply pressure on Caicedo or drops into the cover shadow here, and again, Mangala's here, this leaves Gana Gueye as the last player, or just a Gueye, with a decision to make in terms of what way is he going to go and apply pressure. And because this player is higher, it was often Harrison who would drop off with Gusto, meaning Garnier can edge slightly closer towards Palmer. So what you sort of then saw was something like this in terms of the pressing system. This here shows the 3-2 base setup of Chelsea, with Caicedo and Enzo looking to stretch that Everton midfield to the 3-2 base. You can see with the white lines there, but the yellow line showing how the Everton midfield would sort of be stretched in relation to the Chelsea players. This is how Chelsea would look to manipulate Everton's pressing positions, draw players like Jack Harrison away from the press using Gusto, and allow that ball to go through to either Nicholas Jackson or Cole Palmer. However, at times, it was Malo Gusto finding himself in those pockets alone, as Harrison would look to block it off and play a little bit more aggressive, as you can see in this 4-1-4-1 shape, which would then mean Gusto has to receive the ball and make something happen from that pocket. You would see something of this sort, almost a 1-3-2-4, with both these pockets being covered. And again, I'll try and show some examples, but the idea here was often to sort of draw Mangala in, look to split this sort of area here, and either pull both of these players away so that Jackson can receive with the ball into his feet. When you know you can manipulate the press and you can draw those midfielders apart to allow access into that striker, this is something Maresca has used in all of his teams, especially in that Leicester team where he used to draw and make that pentagon in midfield with his striker at the tip. This then allows those number 8/number 10s in those pockets to then make movements off of the striker to then receive the ball facing forwards, allowing them to then attack that back four or back five of the opposition. But as you can see here, it's the construction of the entire team that matters when you're trying to play this pattern, as drawing those midfielders further apart from their pressing distance, as you can see Caicedo and Enzo doing here, opens up that lane for it to go into the striker, who can then play it forward into one of those pocket players. So it's all about drawing the press in and looking to create those shapes and familiar patterns. It was these entries into Nicholas Jackson that made Chelsea's best chances and allowed Chelsea to find those pocket players in a little bit more space than usual, allowing Jackson to play into these players facing forwards. To then put it off into one of these areas here and allow Chelsea to attack that back four of Everton. And again, it was few and far between. It wasn't as often as you would have liked because of how compact Everton are. And you've just got to give credit to Sean Dyche in that aspect. He puts together a very nice low block. They're very well drilled in the mid block. They know when to drop off and when to apply pressure. It's very well coached. You have to give them the credit. But I think that's how Maresca thought we could sort of see a little bit more joy in the final third, with that entry into Jackson to then pop it off into someone like Gusto, who can then drive forwards, and you essentially would then have this 5 versus 4/5 versus 6 if these guys can match the runs of Gusto and Palmer. But again, that was dragging Harrison deeper, which gives him another issue. Okay, so in the second half, again, about 60 minutes, I think, Maresca did look to make one change in that regard, and it was basically swapping the roles of Enzo and Gusto, because he was obviously wanting, if that ball makes it into this area here, and especially as I keep trying to sort of point out, the chances are going to be fewer. So Maresca was almost putting it now that if one is going to drop in these last half an hour, he would rather it drop to Enzo than Gusto in the attacking third. But again, same thing applied. Try and bring that pressure here. Same with Caicedo, bring that pressure. Garnier is going to come slightly more with Cole Palmer. This player is going to drop deeper, and it was the same sort of patterns, right? But it still, the outcome was pretty much the same. And I do think that we could have made a bit more of a push with some quicker subs. So the 2 subs that were made were Nkunku into here for Jackson. Jackson went at his best. Again, like I said about those link moments. So I do think that's part of the idea of bringing Nkunku into here, because when that ball sort of goes into that player here, that sort of link flick. And you saw Nkunku even in that first sort of 5 minutes, 10 minutes on the pitch, he tried a few little flicks off into these areas here with these little backheel flicks. And again, that was the idea, to link play and allow these two players to face forwards instead of facing backwards. So I understood that change, but again, he wasn't great when he came on. And the other one was Neto off, who again I was surprised with, because I think he was the better of the two out of Sancho and Neto. I thought he was going to maybe offer a little bit more. So maybe putting Neto over to the left and having Madueke on the right maybe makes a slight difference. But that was the two changes. I am very shocked that we didn't see someone like João Felix. That is the sort of thing being spoke about of everybody at the minute. They're shocked that we didn't see him. I am too, purely because, again, if you're going to insist that you're not going to apply the pressure, and as I keep saying, you're not going to try and sustain pressure, instead you're going to try and draw them towards you, and you're going to be very, very patient on the ball and look to be clinical with the few chances that you do create through the lines, then I'm very surprised that Felix isn't your man. Especially because if you get into these areas, you want somebody who's going to try something different to try and unlock a defence, but also get those shots off, that high shot volume. We didn't have enough shot volume from these areas. And even Nkunku wasn't able to get into a position because he's playing in that unfamiliar striker. Not unfamiliar, but it's not his favoured role. So you didn't get the best out of him in that sense. So I'm very shocked that we didn't see something along the lines of Disasi off, Caicedo to right back, and then even just something like this, right? Gusto over to right back, even essentially rejigging the back lines, that you take one of those guys off, but you can still get Enzo maybe a little bit deeper, and you can get Felix into this zone, right? Because then you can still have Caicedo, even if it was from left back, inverting in. Now that's something we haven't seen yet, but I'm surprised we didn't see a change of that magnitude, even if it was Gusto off, Cole over to left back, Disasi stays on, and Caicedo inverts from right back because it's more familiar. But you get the point. I'm surprised we didn't see some sort of change in that last 20, 30 minutes to get Felix into this zone rather than the players that we had already. But I do think that if we look at the game as a whole, I think Maresca was more so looking at it as we don't want to completely throw the kitchen sink at them, get caught on the break and lose the game 1-0. I think as much as he wanted to win the game, that 0-0 draw and protecting what we did have was almost as important for the last 20 minutes as going for the Hail Mary and ending up losing on the break. So you have to understand it to an extent. I do think we could have done a little bit more, and I did expect to see more sustained pressure in the game, which we didn't go for. But as I said, when you didn't have your Cucureas, even your Fofanas, and clearly Vega's not being trusted in this sort of game yet, which is interesting, and Lavia, another big one that could have been really helpful for winning those second balls in this sort of area to sustain pressure for Chelsea. So without the likes of Lavia and Caicedo, not Lavia and Caicedo, Lavia and Cucurella, I understand to an extent the idea of the game plan. So let me know what you guys thought of the game plan, how it sort of played out against Everton, any changes you would have made. Do let me know. Drop a like if you haven't already, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video, which will be the preview for Fulham.